From the Windows, Doors, and More studios, your one-stop shop for all your kitchen and bath needs. The Pat Miller Program. Whoa, 92.3 FM and 1190 AM. Depend on it.
Hey, welcome back. It is the Pat Miller Program, and as I promised you here at the start of the 1 o'clock hour, our second hour on this Saturday, from right here in Indiana, because he's back home saying hi to you and me and going around and visiting and trying to get the pulse of everybody in the state of Indiana for whatever is going on, and all of our looking forward to our hopes for this coming fall, including his race, 3rd District Congressman Jim Banks. Congressman Banks, good afternoon to you, sir. How are you?
Hey, Pat. Good to be with you.
No, always nice to have you here, and I think you know that. Your head sounds a little bit clearer today. That must be because you're back here in Indiana.
That's exactly right. Getting out of the swamp, especially after a week like this, with the State of the Union speech from the weakest and worst president of my lifetime, if not even more so. Getting out of Washington and getting back to the real world is something that is always healthier for me and gives me perspective, recharges me before I go back to Washington, D.C. So it's great to be home.
Yeah, well, it's always great to have you here at home. You and I, what's really crazy is I always think every time you and I talk that the next time you're back in the area, we need to get together just for a Coke or a cup of coffee or a quick lunch or something. And your schedule and my schedule, we just never seem to get all to conflagrate together. But we'll have to get that done someday. So it has been quite a week there in Washington, D.C., as you said, but probably nothing larger. Yes, State of the Union, we could discuss that, but also Donald Trump finally nailing down in finality his hold on the ticket for this fall. He will be the Republican nominee for president.
It's official, but it was obvious a year ago that Donald Trump was going to sweep the field and be the nominee. I know a lot of names were in the mix along the way: Mike Pence and Tim Scott and Chris Christie and all of these people who were in the race at some point. They figured out long before Nikki Haley did that there's no lane here to run against Donald Trump. He's very popular among Republican primary voters, and as Joe Biden drives this country over a cliff, the American people are begging to get Donald Trump back in the White House. So I'm glad that Nikki Haley made it official, dropped out of the race. I wish she would keep her word and endorse Donald Trump like she pledged that she would do to the RNC, that she would support the nominee, whoever that might be. If she's not the nominee, she's sort of indicated that she's not willing to do that at this point. I think that's unfortunate because this country has a choice. Nikki Haley has a choice. Do you either want 4 more years of the disaster that's Joe Biden, or do you want to go back to Donald Trump and the Trump policies and give him 4 more years to get this country back on track? It's a binary choice. It's one or the other, and I hope that Nikki Haley will come to her senses and support Donald Trump and make that official.
One thing that I'm very grateful for, and that is this: now that Nikki Haley has come out and at least made the statement that she's out of the race, she made the statement that Donald Trump is obviously going to be the candidate. Again, an endorsement would be nice. I've got to believe that unless she has gone completely brain dead, an endorsement is yet to come. But it is nice to know that now Donald Trump can turn his attention completely to Joe Biden. It's going to be interesting because whereas Donald Trump didn't want to make himself available for any debates with all of the others running for the Republican nomination, which I get. Most other candidates have done the same. Why wear yourself out in the primary if it's already a foregone conclusion? But I think there's going to be a continued push from the Democrat side for Joe Biden not to debate Donald Trump. I think that's a tragic mistake for the Democrats.
Yeah, without a doubt. But they know Joe Biden's not up to the job. I mean, you saw his speech this week. I mean, imagine this guy at his age with his condition debating with Donald Trump in a televised debate that will probably break every record for political debates in history between these two. So I hope Joe Biden agrees to do it. He owes it to the American people to debate, to participate in that debate. So I'm looking forward to that. I was with President Trump last weekend, and I can tell you this guy does not miss a step. He is working hard as anyone I've ever met in my life, and going from place to place and stumping. He's always in good spirits, and in spite of all the stuff he's dealing with all of the phony court cases in New York and different places, the guy is just he never stops. He never backs down. He's going to do everything that it takes to get this country back on track. And with Joe Biden, you got the opposite. So I can't wait for them to. I hope Joe Biden feels pressured enough to participate in the debate, but we know that his advisors will do everything they can to try to keep him out of it.
Do you think that now that it's clear that it's going to be Biden versus Trump, do you think we'll see a little bit of pulling back from the likes of Iran and Russia and China now that they know for reality that there's at least a 70% chance that Donald Trump will be back in the White House? They're going to know that the clock will be turned back to foreign policy the way it was 4 years ago, and they're not going to have the freedom to spread their socialism, their communism, their mistreatment of their people and others the way they have for the last 3.5 years.
Yeah, but my concern, though, is well, that's all true. My concern is that they recognize they have 9 more months to get away with whatever they want to get away with, and they know that the clock is ticking on Joe Biden. So that's my fear, and that's why America has to be alert and stay awake to the threats around the world from our biggest enemies: China, Iran, North Korea, Russia, other adversaries that want to do harm to America or to Israel, our allies. And yet they know we have the weakest commander-in-chief probably that we've ever had, and they're going to see they'll probably seize on it between now and then too. So that is a deep concern that I have. But the American people get it. I mean, they know that Joe Biden is a weak president. The facts speak for themselves. Over almost 10 million illegals flooding into this country, drugs and crime, violent crime, the daily cost of living in this country has dramatically gone up because of Joe Biden. America is ready to turn the page on this guy, but our enemies would love to keep this guy around for 4 more years. He's just he just exemplifies weakness on the world stage, and I think our adversaries they like that. They want that out of America. They don't want Donald Trump back in the White House who's going to hold them accountable and will put them on notice that if you harm America or our allies, you're going to pay the price for it.
The one thing that I think has been interesting to watch and to listen to, especially over the last year and a half of the Biden administration, it's been that they're trying to tout numbers and try to trumpet themselves and pat themselves on the back for these great strides that they're making, whether it has to do with the economy or in dealing with the border or dealing with, employment. And all they're doing is they're seeing the economy and employment and the border trying to get back to where it was when Joe Biden inherited all this from Donald Trump. And even this week, and even with the State of the Union, I mean, Joe Biden sitting there and basically talking about the fact that Donald Trump handed him, the country was like in the throes of hell or something. Nothing could have been further from the truth. He is scrambling, Congressman, just trying to get the country back to anything that looked even similar to what it was that Donald Trump handed him.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, Joe Biden is telling the American people that they're better off, but nobody feels it. Nobody believes it.
No.
And that's just the reality of it. I mean, everywhere I go, as I'm campaigning for the Senate around the state of Indiana, I mean, Hoosiers don't feel better. They do not feel better off than what they were 4 years ago. And that's what the election is going to come down to. And I feel that I believe this election is going to be more of a landslide for Donald Trump than what people are guessing at this point, because it really does come down to that. The American people do not feel better off than they did 4 years ago.
I think it points that way also, just so everybody is careful, Congressman, and they don't take it for granted. We need every conservative, every God-fearing Republican, everyone to get to the polls in the primary, even though the primary settled, get there in the primary and then get there in the general election. And let's make sure that nobody can flip a few numbers here and there on a few ballot boxes in a few states. We need to nail this thing down and nail it down early.
Yeah, no one should take their vote for granted, especially in Indiana. We have big races in the primary, 4 big congressional races around the state, a governor's race, a Senate race, and Donald Trump is going to need allies. I mean, I really believe these primaries in Republican districts matter because Donald Trump is going to need allies who are going to fight for the agenda that Donald Trump is being elected to push for, to secure the border, to make America energy independent again,
right?
To prevent forever wars and keep our military strong and project strength around the globe. When I came to Congress in 2016, when Donald Trump was elected the first time, you had Republican leaders in the House and the Senate who did not align with Donald Trump and his agenda. And Donald Trump this time is going to need allies in all these places. So don't take your vote for granted don't skip the primary. Don't take your vote for granted in the primary, because in Indiana we make really important decisions about what kind of Republicans we're going to send to Washington who might fight for the Trump agenda, or there are Republicans out there, I believe, running all over the state who will actually fight against the Trump agenda. We can't afford that.
No, you're exactly correct. Congressman, listen, I know you're busy. I know that when you come home, at least these days, you're gearing everything up for you, first of all, for the very important Indiana primary that's coming up just in weeks. And I know you want to be ready for that, be clear-headed and sharp-minded. You want to make as many people as you can in the state meet you and understand who you are and what you're trying to do and what you're running for. So I appreciate the fact that you're making time, hopefully, as we continue to move forward, every Saturday of the month as we get ready for that. And I appreciate the fact that you've made time for us again today. Let me know if I need to get together and I need to let you pick up a tab for me for lunch or something. So
I'll be happy to buy just one time.
Yeah. Tell Keller he owes me. That'll drive him crazy.
I think he owes me too, but I'll let him know. Okay.
Hey, listen, Congressman Banks, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Have a good day.
This is the Pat Miller Program on WOWO, 92.3 FM and 1190 AM, and on the WOWO app.
And welcome back as we continue to march through this Saturday together. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, let's talk a little bit about the border. Joe Biden, he's building a fence, built one this week. Did you know that? The administration built a fence this week, but not at the border. They built it somewhere else. We'll talk about that. And do you know what gaslighting is? It's where you make something look like you're doing something and you're making them think you're really, really, really on top of it. We've been gaslighted by this administration, and we've been gaslighted by this administration quite a bit, and they've done it again. But first, one senator says that what they're doing, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, that it's morally reprehensible. Talking about FEMA on poor handling of illegal immigrant travel. Key Senate Republicans have blasted, and I mean blasted, FEMA agency for shoddy record keeping regarding the transportation of illegal immigrants throughout the U.S. FEMA distributes grants to nonprofit organizations for shelter and travel expenses for illegal immigrants, but last month informed the Heritage Foundation's Oversight Project that it has no documentation. Okay, listen to what I'm getting ready to tell you, okay? Under all of this, the Heritage Foundation's Oversight Project has no documentation about how taxpayer money has been spent. FEMA distributes it. They're responsible for it. They're supposed to be transparent about it for shelter and travel. But now when they've been questioned on it, they're letting us know when they informed the Heritage Foundation Oversight Project, they've got no documentation at all, none, about how it is that money was collected, how it was spent, and how they've documented it. How can that be? How can that be? Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson said it is becoming clearer every day that the Democrats' open border catastrophe is not only being orchestrated by the Biden administration, the American taxpayer is unwittingly being forced to pay for this invasion. So in other words, not only are they cramming it down our throat, but once they've crammed it down our throat and we've choked on it and regurgitated it a little bit, then they also come up with the bill that we get to pay. This admission by FEMA that it lacks documentation for expenses comes less than a year after an internal federal audit stated that FEMA is responsible for a detailed accounting of all program funds. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican Texas, said this is part of President Joe Biden's larger intention of an open border with as little oversight as is absolutely possible. Well, doesn't that tell you that alone is a little bit of a recipe for disaster? I mean, what are we thinking? That's asinine. Despite FEMA's lack of a mechanism to track where these funds are sending illegal aliens, I know, newcomers, no illegal aliens, Biden still insists that Congress appropriate over $1.4 billion more in federal emergency management agency funds to transport illegal aliens all over the country. The Texas Senator, Ted Cruz, called the Biden administration policies on the border reckless and morally reprehensible. And that's on a good day. The Texas Senator said this is reprehensible. We heard reports, he said, a 22-year-old college student, Laken Riley, here's the story again, was murdered by an illegal alien. We have also heard of a 2-year-old boy being shot outside of D.C., and an adolescent being raped in Massachusetts, and a teenager being sexually assaulted in Louisiana, all of them by illegal aliens. The human cost continues to rise as a result of this full-fledged invasion. We have got to secure the border. We've got to secure the border, and we've got to do it right now. A FEMA spokesperson forwarded a daily signal request for comment to the Department of Homeland Security. The DHS did not immediately nor subsequently respond to the request. In mid-February, the agency, FEMA, did inform the Heritage Foundation's oversight project that it had no responsive records regarding the expense. Based on the original request you provided, now, I want you to follow this logic. Are you ready? Follow me along. Mr. Producer, you hanging with me? Based on the original request you provided, we do not have reason to believe that FEMA would have records responsive to this request. Okay, FEMA that's responsible for travel and for the putting up of people that travel, okay, the illegal aliens. They're responsible for it. Based on the original request you provided, we do not have reason to believe that FEMA would have records responsible to this request. Accordingly, we are administratively closing the request without prejudice. In other words, we're going to close your request without giving you information about whether it was handled right or wrong or yes or no or up or down. Well, that's handy. I mean, we can just pull that off, isn't it? The request specifically asked for the fiscal year 2023 information about records regarding the transportation eligible reimbursement for the Emergency Fund and Shelter National Board Program, the Emergency Food and Shelter Program. That's what they were requesting. That's what they're required to provide. So what are they doing? Rather than giving you a figure and fighting with you over it, Rather than seeing Karine Jean-Pierre stand there at her little bully pulpit in the press room and try to figure out what's going on, they're going to help her out, help the president out, help themselves out, and just take it all off the board. The Oversight Project posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, of FEMA. They have admitted that they have zero documentation of where illegals travel to on taxpayer-funded resettlement trips. You're paying for it. They've taken them. They've moved them wherever, but they've got no record, so they're not going to give you any. There you've got it. Back with more straight ahead right here on WOWO. This is Pat Miller, 92.3 FM, 1190 AM. Well, President Biden has made a decision. He's made an order, if you would, and President Biden has ordered 2 nights ago that a protective fence was to be erected around the U.S. Capitol in preparation for the State of the Union address. Now, let me just say this. I get it that a fence like that is presumably built and put in place to keep bad actors from trying to infiltrate the security perimeter. I don't have a problem with that. I really don't. Look, if the president is Ronald Reagan or Bush or it's Donald Trump, I don't want those Republican presidents hurt. If it's Jimmy Carter, if it's Bill Clinton, if it's, Barack Obama, if it's Joe Biden, I don't want them hurt either. The idea of the fence is you keep people away that would totally destroy the goings-on of what's happening in the building because they have nothing good to do or to say about what happens. They are just in there to cause a problem. So I don't have any problem with that. We need to make sure all of our elected leaders, all of them, are protected from those who would do them harm. I don't have a problem with that, especially with so many radicals and Islamic radicals obviously lurking in our country and trying to find every chance they can to raise their heads up from out of the marsh and to come and cause us a problem. Tom Tiffany, who is a Republican from Wisconsin, he said, under the Trump administration, we built a wall to keep our country safe and secure. Well, under the Biden regime, they put fences up around the Capitol before the State of the Union address while allowing an invasion at our borders to continue. And that's the problem I've got. Yes, protect the president. Yes, protect everybody else inside of that Capitol building. And I'm glad that we did that and we had no problems with what went on that night and that everything went well, except for the speech. But President Biden, while they were so intent, not he alone, but he and others from his party, they were so intent in making sure that they had protection in place for the Capitol building. And I can hear all their screams right now. Well, you remember what happened back on January the 6th? Yeah, we're going to use January the 6th till we're blue in the face. Here's the problem. Mike Collins, I think, is the one that I heard say this. If I'm wrong, please forgive me. But I think it was Mike Collins, who's a Republican from Georgia. And Mike Collins had said, if it weren't for double standards, we'd have no standards at all. Which is why a lot of people are wondering why President Biden is not building a fence along the southern border with the same intensity that we built a fence around the Capitol building. Hundreds, if not thousands of Americans have been victims of the illegals who have breached our borders, as we said on last week's program. These are not just newcomers, as we're trying to call them now, so that we won't think that these are people that don't mean us good, but they mean us harm. They're not just newcomers. They're illegal immigrants. They're malicious militants. They are coming with double standards. If you don't believe me, just ask the family of 22-year-old Georgia nursing student Laken Riley, one of the most high-profile victims of the Biden administration. If Biden can build a wall around the Capitol, he can build a wall along our southern border. Look, and I mean this, the president needs to be protected. No question. I don't want to live in a world where some thugs can come over, or a group of thugs or problems, and all at once they can enter into our Capitol building and they can pick off our president or our vice president or the Speaker of the House or certain numbers of senators or representatives, and they can go in there and just get it done. No, we don't want that. No doubt the president deserves to be protected. But then, so did Laken Riley, the 22-year-old Georgia nursing student. A fence for one should be a fence for all. We're going to be back with more as we continue to move through this Saturday afternoon. Thank you very much for being with us. More on the president's stand on the border, and I think the president might be gaslighting us just a little bit. That all comes up right after our break, and we'll do it straight ahead right here on WOWO 92.3 FM and 1190 AM.
This is the Pat Miller Program on WOWO 92.3 FM and 1190 AM and at WOWO.com.
Welcome back here on the Pat Miller Program. Hope you're having a good Saturday. Thank you for taking the time to spend some of it with us. We appreciate it very much. Remember, if you'd like to talk to us while we're here or even after we're gone, you can send us a text. That's at 46862. 46862. Text the word WOWO first, and then your question or comment, and it comes to us right here in the studio. Coming up after this segment, we'll be at the top of the hour, and then after the news break, Philip Wegman from Real Clear Politics will kick off our 2 o'clock hour with Philip from Washington, D.C. We were talking in the last segment about the president building a fence around the Capitol, but not one around the border. Well, look, it's an election year, so I get that. Joe Biden, once again, sees himself running against Donald Trump. However, this time around, it's Joe Biden that has to defend a presidential record. And it's a pretty lousy record. I mean, it's abysmal, which is why Joe Biden is underwater on nearly every major issue, and he's underwater against Donald Trump. Arguably, there was no issue bigger for Trump during his 2016 campaign than illegal immigration. That's where the phrase "build the wall" was perhaps most memorable, and it was the biggest utterance of the entire campaign. But while Trump was stymied by a Congress that was divided over the issue, there was no question he worked to fulfill his promise, even if the challenge proved to be bigger and tougher and sharper to navigate than he had even imagined. That's why it's so difficult for Trump to accomplish what Democrat lawmakers themselves had called for just a decade earlier. Why was that so difficult? Because you've got people in your own party that don't always understand exactly where you're going and what you're trying to accomplish. They also don't understand why everybody from the other party is just sniping at you when it seems that there's no reason to. See, the reason of all of this is the calculations that are done every day for finding out who is in and who controls power in the calculus of what we call Washington. Democrats realized that in order to keep and to grow their Washington power, they needed a bigger potential voting bloc. It's the strategy they used when they decided to turn California deep blue. And it took them a while, but when they got there, California now is gold in the bank for the Democrat Party. And it's the strategy Biden has been engaged in implementing since day one of his taking office. The trouble is, nearly unchecked influx of 9 million illegal aliens into the U.S. has the vast majority of Americans now demanding an end to this surge and control of our border. There are some who still sit there and they're saying in their hidden recesses of their minds and hearts, well, yeah, this is tough in the border, but this influx of people, and if most of them vote for our guy and for our party, this is all going to pan out in the end. This will all work out. And some, even on the left, are starting to scratch their heads and saying, okay, maybe we'll win an election, but is this worth it? How many generations are we selling under the river right now, throwing them over the bridge just so that we can have a winning record this time? Biden started a bait and switch strategy. As we've seen over and over and over with this administration, along with all the left media cohorts that are on the bandwagon with Biden, he has moved from a position of denying the existence of a border crisis to blaming Republican lawmakers for supposedly preventing Biden from tackling it. So now let me get this straight. Joe Biden spent the first 3 years of his administration telling us there was no border problem. Do you remember that? Jen Psaki, before Karine Jean-Pierre, and now Miss Jean-Pierre herself, are telling us there is no problem at the border. Now, all at once, there is. And the Republicans caused it. I can't imagine that when Joe Biden was putting together his State of the Union address, that he planned to hang immigration crisis around the Republicans' necks for failing to pass the Democrats' bad border bill. But there you have it. That's what they did, and that's what they're hanging their hats on. Ironic, but not surprising. During a nationally televised Democrat presidential debate back in 2019, Joe Biden declared that all those people who are seeking asylum should immediately surge to the border. Donald Trump didn't say that. Barack Obama didn't say it. Joe Biden said it. It's like as if he had a megaphone standing on the south portico of the White House screaming, "Ollie, ollie, out in free. If you can get here, you're in." Every day between now and November, the American people are going to know that the only reason the border is not secure is Donald Trump and his MAGA Republican friends. No, I don't know that we know that. In fact, I'm pretty sure that we don't know it. I'm pretty sure that we realize a lot of the blame, Mr. President, relies on you. Biden made some further promises. He said, in the first 100 days of my administration, no one will be deported at all. From that point on, the only deportations that will take place are commissions of felonies in the United States. And to his credit, Biden has stuck to that radical immigration non-enforcement promise. In fact, even to the extent that now there are some that have created felonies in this country, that they still are not being put out of the country. But a majority of Americans, people out here in flyover country, you and me, where we live out here and all we know is how to work hard and to till the ground and to pay our mortgage and to love our wives and children, to kiss and love each other, to go to church, love our God, be honest in our workplace, and just keep going forward. The majority of us are more and more and more every day rejecting the idea, rejecting that radical illegal immigration agenda, especially after gruesome murders like that of Laken Riley. Pat, there you go, bringing her up again. Yeah, I'm bringing it up again, and I'll probably keep bringing it up all this year. And the only thing I can be glad of is it wasn't one of my girls, nor one of yours. Rather than changing course, rather than stepping up at the White House and saying, okay, that's it. We can't allow this again. We've got to do whatever it takes to stop all this. All he does is he spins the blame. He claims that he is powerless to do anything about the problem without Congress's help. When the truth is, ladies and gentlemen, the truth is he could easily reverse course and start enforcing our nation's immigration laws, but that would go against his big overall plan. If anybody doubts that a de facto open border is not Biden's plan, then the recent revelation that his administration used its CPB, the CPP-1 program, to fly 320,000 migrants from Latin America to 43 U.S. cities, I mean, that should do away with any doubts that you and I might have. Any doubts whatsoever. This scheme allowed the Biden administration to bring in immigrants and bypass the border points of entry. We learned about it thanks to a recent Freedom of Information Act, a FOIA, filed by the Center for Immigration Studies, but we still don't know which specific cities these illegal aliens were flown to. Now, let me get this straight. So this president and his administration flew in, write this number down, they flew in 320,000 migrants from Latin America, and we flew them to 43 U.S. cities. They bypassed any border of entry. We only learned about it thanks to a FOIA Act, a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. But we still don't know which specific cities these illegal aliens were flown to. I thought governments were supposed to work for the people. Everybody that ever runs for president, put me in office and I'm working for you. Doesn't look like it. I mean, under these legally dubious parole programs that were explained, Todd Bensman said, in fact, Todd has been on my program several times, aliens who cannot legally enter the country use the CBP One app to apply for travel authorization and temporary humanitarian release from those airports. The parole program allows for 2-year periods of legal status during which adults are eligible for work authorization. So not only is Biden disingenuously, and I do mean disingenuously, claiming his hands are tied in being able to address the illegal alien migration crisis, but this whole administration is actively aiding and abetting it. And now he plans to tell the American people a bald-faced lie, that it's those dirty, stinking, filthy, rotten, racist MAGA Republicans who are to blame. Okay, well, let me just ask you a question. How's that possible? How on earth is that possible that in this place where we have absolutely nothing, we have no control over any part of immigration? None. None. Biden had said on his inauguration day, starting from day one, all of the things that are in place, like Title 42 and stay in Mexico, that all goes away as soon as I step into office. And it did. And that's when all the problems started. But it's not his fault. It's not his fault. It's Republicans' fault. If you can figure that out, you're smarter than me. Real quick before we go to our break, Sweden has officially now joined NATO. They did it a couple of days ago on Thursday after Russia's invasion of Ukraine spurred it to rethink its defense policy and abandon its long-held position of neutrality. See, you might think it's good and noble to be neutral, and it maybe was, but now when they see, this is something that Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson of Sweden formally handed over accession documents to the U.S. State Department in Washington, D.C., the final step of a months-long process to gain the approval of all members to allow his country to become our 32nd member of NATO. Why? Because even though it is noble and sounds very pretty to say we're a neutral country, we're the new Switzerland, you also don't want to become part of the ash heap. You also don't want to be part of what it is that Russia marches over in their battle to try to reconstitute the Soviet Union. Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State, said, with receipt of this instrument of accession, let me be the very first to welcome Sweden as a party of the Washington Treaty and the 32nd member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. So it's a big step, and they've taken it. Another big step, we're going to go to the top of the hour, and when we come back, we're going to have Philip Wegman from Real Clear Politics right after the news here at the top of the hour. The 2 o'clock hour is straight ahead right here on WOWO 92.3 FM and 1190 AM.
Podcasts by Federated Media.